Okay. So, hi everyone, my name is Robin Akampora. I work for Yale's Office of Career Strategy. The area that I specifically work in is Common Good and Creative Careers. And for those of you who are not familiar with Common Good and Creative Careers, also known as CGCC, we are an initiative out of OCS, and our specific mission is to ensure students like all of you who are interested in areas like nonprofit, education, government, all of the arts, as well as communications, that you're aware of all of the resources and the programming and the services that our office provides in these areas. So we are really excited tonight to have Jen Leybovich. Jen and I have known each other for quite some time. In fact, she did a talk like this, gosh, it must have been 3 or 4 years ago at this point. So I was really excited that she was willing to come back and talk to you all. I am going to go ahead and read Jen's bio just to give you a little more sense of what Jen's involved in, and then we'll be turning it over to her. So Jen graduated from UCLA in 2007, and then she went to get her MBA from Yale School of Management in 2013. Jen was a New Sector Alliance MBA Summer Fellow, and while at Yale, she was the co-chair of SOM's Net Impact Group, as well as the finance manager for Food for Thought. After graduating from Yale, Jen joined Main Street Launch as the Vice President of Programs and Strategy, and then she was promoted to Senior Vice President in 2016 to now her current role of Executive Vice President, which she became in 2017. Jen will talk further about this, but Main Street Launch's mission is to create economic opportunity by empowering entrepreneurs. And this is through innovative partnerships. They provide business owners with capital, education, and relationships that allow them to flourish. Jen was also the San Francisco Bay Area founder and president of the Yale Alumni Nonprofit Alliance, which is also known as YANA. YANA is a shared interest group out of Yale's Alumni Association. It's comprised of alumni who are nonprofit practitioners, and they offer speaker events, they do roundtables, they have service opportunities, and students are more than welcome to get involved with YANA. So I just want to give a plug for YANA. You can check them out at yale-nonprofitalliance.org. And that's actually a great segue to tonight's talk, which is part of the YANA speaker series. And Jen's going to be talking about networking and job searching in common good careers. So I hear from a lot of students who are not sure what networking means in these areas, Jen. So I'm excited to have you kind of talk about your experience. In terms of, just so everybody knows, there is a Q&A piece at the bottom here that you are welcome to put in questions kind of as Jen's talking, and she might even stop between different sections of her presentation to answer those. So Jen, thank you so much for coming. I will turn things over to you.
Great. Thanks, Robin, for having me, and thanks everyone for joining tonight. Thanks for answering that first prompt. It's interesting to see what everyone's interested in pursuing. I'll ask a couple more questions in there throughout just to keep it a little interactive. As Robin mentioned, my name's Jen Leybovich. I graduated Yale School of Management 7.5 years ago, and since then have been at Main Street Launch, which is a community development financial institution. So we provide loans to businesses who can't access that capital from mainstream sources, such as banks. So it's our way to level the playing field for entrepreneurship. We're based in Oakland, California, and serve throughout California. And my role there is I raise our capital as my main function. So I raise the capital that we lend out to the businesses, and then the capital that we need to pay our staff salaries. So I've been in the social sector since I graduated UCLA undergrad 13 years ago. So all of my job search and networking and informational interviews has been exclusively in the social sector. So I'm happy to share some of tips from my experience, and we're happy to answer your questions as well. So let's get a quick idea of who's here. In the chat, if you could type 1, 2, 3, or 4 for your year in Yale right now. So 1 would be freshman, 4 would be senior. So I can see the range of folks who are here. And Robin, can everyone see the chat or just me? Oh, you're muted if you're responding.
Sorry. Yes, it looks like they should be able to see it. Well, it depends if they you can put all panelists or put all panelists and everyone.
Gotcha.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
So for folks who can't see the chat, it looks like we have a good amount of second years and actually looks split between second, third, and fourth years. Great. And then second question to know how many of you all have started a social sector internship or job search experience. So could you put yes if you've done a decent amount of looking into job searching, doing informational interviews, and no if it's pretty new to you, so you haven't at all or done it very limited. So yes, if you have some experience, and no if not much yet in the job search for social sector jobs. Okay, so this is also looking split between yes and no. Okay, great. Well, thanks for answering that question. I'll go ahead and share my screen now. And we have a presentation here, and then we'll stop in between sections for y'all to ask questions. So you can use the Q&A box or the chat box. We'll be looking at both. Okay, share. Okay. Robin, can you nod if that looks good? All right. Great. So I already introduced myself. We'll talk about the various jobs I've had in the social sector and how I found them. So you can see the various avenues of finding social sector jobs, the ones that I've had experience doing, and then some tips for job searching and some questions that I've asked at informational interviews just to make it a bit more familiar for y'all so it doesn't feel as a foreign concept. It's here's some basic questions that I've asked that have really filled a half an hour informational interview with a lot of in-depth, helpful questions. So as Robin mentioned, I graduated from UCLA in 2007. I focused on business economics and political science and accounting as minors. My first job at UCLA, my main activity that I enjoyed the most was I volunteered at our official student charity, which is called UCLA Unicamp. And we took children from low-income communities to summer camp in the woods. And I loved spending 4 years on such a mission-oriented project and realized I want to be part of nonprofits, social good, anything that's contributing to the community. So I looked for jobs in DC and New York after graduating so I could have some East Coast experience because I've been in the West Coast prior to that. So the first jobs I found in DC through Idealist. I think Idealist is still pretty popular now. It has a lot of social sector jobs listed. And that's where I found the first two jobs. Or my first, actually, I started off as a consultant for a public service agency and then 3 years as a nonprofit consultant where I worked for nonprofits in DC and New York. From that experience, I realized I had done the consulting and then worked at a nonprofit, and I realized I liked being at a nonprofit more so that I could be a part of one organization and help build it. So I wanted to go to business school to learn the skill sets to be a leader in a nonprofit. And so I went to Yale School of Management to get that experience. So before attending Yale, that summer before, I wanted to decide if I like domestic economic development or international economic development. So I heard from a friend. So that's the second way I found an opportunity was just through my friend network of a really cool nonprofit in Peru in microfinance. So I went there for 3 months. And from that experience, I actually realized I wanted to do domestic economic development, but I only found that out through doing it myself and realizing that domestic was a better fit. So at Yale School of Management, I was involved, as Robin mentioned, at Net Impact. I chaired that my second year. I sat on a board of a nonprofit. I did consulting projects in New Orleans and in India for social sector entrepreneurs and organizations. I did research with the Yale Law School for the industry I'm currently in, community development financial institutions. So that gave me great experience to then, when I applied to work at a CDFI, I had 2 years of experience with the Yale Law School doing research in that field. Job treks was a big part of the SOM experience. I'll mention that later. And I also worked on the philanthropy conference. So between my first and second year, I did an MBA internship at the Nonprofit Finance Fund. And I did that through a group called New Sector Alliance. So that opportunity, a fellow student told me about New Sector Alliance. So that was how I found that organization. And then Nonprofit Finance Fund, I found out about through a job trek. So I'm not sure if job treks are happening in undergraduate. They're really popular in graduate programs. It's where a bunch of students get together, they find organizations they want to go visit together, and then they'll go visit maybe like 2 or 3 in a day. And in ours, I went in San Francisco, we did maybe 4 or 5 visits a day over 4 days. So we visited a lot of organizations. One of them was Nonprofit Finance Fund. So I got the card of someone who attended that session, and we talked after, and I followed up for an internship there. And then for my current job, I've been at since I graduated. So it's been 7.5 years. I found that out through a job trek. I did my second year, but I actually did that job trek on my own. I missed the group job trek to San Francisco. I knew I wanted to come back to the West Coast, which is why I chose San Francisco's job trek. But I was in India for that consulting project. So I did my own job trek during my spring break. And that was actually, that was terrific for propelling my job search, because I did on my own. So I had to reach out. I reached out to 25 nonprofits in San Francisco and Oakland who were focused on economic development. And 20 out of the 25 responded pretty quickly saying they would let me do an informational interview with them. And I'm pretty sure the Yale name really helped because it seemed to provide some credibility. And I think people were excited to interview someone, or for someone to talk to someone from Yale and from the East Coast. And they were pleased that I would have heard of them from being all the way out at Yale, and heard about them, the work they're doing in San Francisco. So definitely use the Yale name, I would say, when you're doing informational interviews. It helps. And so I interviewed 20 organizations, and they were informal interviews. I wasn't asking for a job. It was just, I'll show you some of the questions I asked. And one of those turned into the job I'm at now. So I kept in touch with the CEO of one of those organizations. And then we stayed in touch my last 3 months of MBA program. And then I came to San Francisco and have been there since. So that job through the informational interview process. And then, as Robin mentioned, YANA, I started our first chapter of YANA in San Francisco, and then helped 6 or 7 other chapters launch after that. But that opportunity came to me through co-chairing Net Impact. YANA in New York was in touch with us at Yale Net Impact. And when I graduated, they asked if I'd be interested in starting a chapter, and I thought it was a great opportunity. So I did that. I'm seeing 2 questions.
Would you like me to read them to you, Jen, or what do you prefer?
I actually was able to pull it up through the shared screen. So which firms did you do nonprofit consulting? And what is your advice for how we get our foot into the door for nonprofit consulting? So in DC, I was on 4 projects. The main one was in New York, and that was a nonprofit who served youth, and it helped build the capacity of 22 nonprofits serving youth. So we provided the marketing and fundraising for the nonprofit to then help the other nonprofits serve youth. And then in DC, I did consulting for a theater and for the YWCA and for an environmental group. So it's a really good experience, I think, to see if you like a nonprofit consulting and if you like working at a nonprofit directly. So if you, during your 4 years at school, it'd be great if you are interested in both to try to get an internship in both, or at least do informational interviews, because they are pretty different and they're both great avenues, but it's just a personal preference of which one you enjoy doing more. So to get into the door for nonprofit consulting, that I found through Idealist. So that was I applied through the normal channels. But I would say I'll have a slide later of how to network for jobs. And I would just say start to do informational interviews for folks who work at nonprofit consulting firms so that they know you're interested, so that when there's an opening, they can let you know. And if you do research, I had a spreadsheet of all of the different industries I was interested in. So like nonprofit consulting, economic development, international development. And I had listed a bunch of different organizations as I came across them, just for me to be like, okay, let me check those job boards every month or so to see if a new job came up. So I would just start keeping a list of nonprofit consulting firms you hear of, so you can check their website to see if any positions become available. So that's one avenue. The alumni network is another avenue. And if you're doing an informational with a nonprofit consultant, you could gauge it and see if it might be appropriate to ask, like, oh, is there other nonprofit consulting organizations in your field that you have enjoyed working with or hearing about that you would recommend that I reach out to as well? So you can always ask your network for recommendations of other organizations. And the day-to-day, what is the day-to-day like as a nonprofit consultant? Really depends on the type of organization you're at. So I did my role, our group focused on fundraising and marketing. So most of everything we did was helping the nonprofit with their fundraising and with their marketing campaigns. Other groups focus on strategy. So they'll work with the board of directors and the CEO on strategy for the nonprofit. So it really depends on what the focus is of your nonprofit consulting firm. And then you might be on multiple projects. So each day you're like 2 hours on each different project. So if that's something you like, that's great. If you'd rather work at one organization, focus on organization, maybe nonprofit consulting would be a tougher fit. How do you manage finances for grad school? Do you have advice for grad school? Always looking for scholarships. It's a good option for grad school to help manage finances. And just I would keep track of expenses, kind of give myself a budget of how much to spend for socializing, for books, for housing, just to keep it in mind how much I needed to save or to try and get scholarships for. Okay, why don't we go on to the next slide, but feel free to keep asking questions. We'll do another round later. Okay, so job search considerations. I have 3 slides of different things to think about when you're looking for a job. And these are things you could ask about in the informational interview if it's not clear when you're looking at the website. But it just helps you, because there's millions of nonprofits and social sector organizations, which is why networking is helpful. Going to different sessions with people coming to campus is helpful to learn about them, but there's just so many that to narrow down what you'd be interested in, it's helpful to think through these things. So number 1 would be location. Is there a certain region of the country you want to be in? I knew I wanted to come back to California, so that's why I looked at San Francisco. Is there a size of the city? Do you like small towns? Do you like big towns? Do you not want to be someone who sits in a car all day like we do in LA? Or maybe you want a city that has a really good transportation system. So think about location, think about the type of entity. So social sector is such a broad term, and so many organizations and companies have a social sector aspect to what they do. Like Google, for example, there's google.org, which focuses on how they're contributing to the community. They have grant programs at Google. They have a lot of community aspects, which are not necessarily the typical Google products you would think of. So there's government, there's, in my industry, for example, there are the banks contribute the most to our industry, and that's through their community development division. So there's folks like me who want to be on the impact side, and so they'll work for a bank, but in the side of the bank that invests in the community. So that's a for-profit position, but it's still social sector oriented. You can work at a 501c3, which is where I'm at, or a social enterprise, which is just a term for a nonprofit that has a strong revenue stream. So they're like a business with a social mission. And you can work at a foundation, lots of international and domestic organizations. Think about the type of industry. So several of you mentioned the industries you're in. That's great to know what your interests are, or you can do a couple internships in different industries, because when you're at a job, you are really focused on the industry. So you want to make sure you enjoy learning a lot about that sector. The type of roles, there's so many roles at organizations. I listed a few: marketing, fundraising, finance, operations, sales or business development, administration, human resources, strategy, managing the board. So you could be like a specialist who works on one of these, or a generalist who works on a lot, which is actually on my next screen. If you just kind of want to get an idea, you could try to find a role that's more general, that covers a few areas. Or if you know, I really want to develop a skill set in this area, or at least spend a lot of time in this area to know if I want to keep doing that, you could find a role that's very specific. Think about what type of company and culture you want to be at. Do you like working at a big company, a small company? There's pluses to both. Sometimes there's more growth opportunities in a smaller or a larger firm. Sometimes look at, do you like where everyone's working on all the projects together? It's more flat. Everyone's involved in everything, or if it's more hierarchical. Do you like companies that have a flexible work environment, or if it's very structured and everyone's job never really changes, or organizations that are constantly adapting to what's changing in the public sector, the private sector, the government sector? Do you like being on teams? Do you like working on your own? Do you like more autonomy or more collaboration? Do you like organizations that are really innovative and fast moving, or you'd prefer organizations that are more mature, gradual? They don't, I guess it depends if you like a lot of change or you prefer change coming at a slower pace. Do you like organizations that are very transparent with their staff, or only the senior management knows a lot, but maybe the lower levels aren't as involved? Sometimes firms have everybody involved in everything. You can look at the funding model of an organization. Do you like where it's a charity, such as 100% of their revenue comes from donations? Or do you prefer a group like I'm at, where half comes from donations, half comes from income we generate ourselves through our loans? Do you want a company that's really resourceful, that has a lot of resources already? That way, the job's a bit more secure, or one that is constantly fundraising every year. In general, nonprofits are constantly fundraising every year, but some are really well resourced. And then think about where you're interested in being 5 to 10 years down the line. Do you, if you can imagine a job you're really interested in, such as, let's say, a chief financial officer or a chief operations officer, or the chief program officer, you can then plan, like, well, what are the jobs I would want to do in the meantime to get the experience to get to that job? Other considerations: do you want to do an internship just to get a bit of experience, or do you want to commit to a full-time job? Do you want to build your resume of experience you already have, or do you want to add something new to your resume that's not there yet? Is there a full-time job potential with your internship? Is there learning potential, growth potential with either your internship or your full-time job? You also want to look at the wage, and if there's a stipend provided, if there's professional development opportunities they offer interns or full-time job staff, and what are opportunities for advancement. Those are things you could ask during around professional development. You could ask that in an informational interview. And then, of course, mission and impact. What is the mission and impact of this organization? Make sure you're passionate about it and you want to spend a lot of your day working on it. So let's see. Do we have any? If there's any new questions about job search, happy to do that, or we can move on to the next section. Just going to clear these ones. Okay. Okay, and Robin, is there anything in the chat, or I should move on?
I do not see anything in the chat. I was just gonna mention, it's interesting when you look at these are such great questions, and obviously you have to be considering the stuff and then prioritizing, like, which one of these is the most important. Like you said, like, you knew you were going back to the West Coast, Jen, right? That was really important. I was just gonna ask you about that role piece, which, like, what is my role gonna be there? And I definitely talk to a lot of students who they're not sure, how that's going to work in a nonprofit, or like what roles are even possible. So I mean, I guess it's not really a question, just to kind of emphasize that that's okay, right? That's what these internships are for, is to figure out what the different roles are there. Or, as you mentioned, in these informational interviews, like, kind of getting a little bit more idea from somebody at the organization, like, where could they see a particular role going? Is it like outward facing? Is it inward facing?
Yeah, I think on that point, as you're doing research of organizations, look at the staff page. A lot of times nonprofits are small enough where they can list all their staff and just see, like, what are all the roles? Like, we're at a lending institution. there are a lot of very specific lending roles and financial roles in our organization, but there's also program roles. We have program staff who we have an African-American business program. So they just focus on providing comprehensive services to our African-American borrowers. We have a veterans program. So we have 4 veterans on staff who provide services to veterans. So that's a program role in a financial institution. So you just never know what kind of roles will be at an organization. So take a look at the website. When you're on Indeed or the other online search, the online job platforms, you can click on, usually on LinkedIn and on the sites, you can click on the company and see the various roles they have posted, just to get an idea, maybe something else at the company is actually more of interest to you. Maybe it's more of a general role or more of a specific role.
Great point.
And on that, there's a slide, I'll just mention it now on this one. So as you're looking at the sites, when you read the job description, that's really helpful to get like, what are the actual responsibilities they're looking for in this job now? And then you can look at a job. Oh, I like that job for maybe 5 to 10 years from now. What are they listing in the job description as the skills I need? That way you can look for jobs in the next 5 to 10 years that have those skills. So that way you feel comfortable applying for that role down the line. And it can help you set your path too. If you have an idea of where you want to go, it helps you pick the jobs along the way. So let's go back to this slide, which is various searching resources. So I mentioned some of the ones I use to find a job. There's the Career Center, great resource, the alumni database, lots of alumni who are very willing to talk with students. The job treks, there's bringing in speakers to campus. So you could be the one who reaches out to an organization you're interested in and say, hey, I'd love to bring you to campus. We'll have like 20 students. Well, I don't know how it works in COVID, but bring you to Zoom and have students learn from you. And that way, if you're the one who's bringing them in or who's leading the job trek, you get to meet the speaker directly. They get to see that you take initiative, you show leadership. It helps to build that relationship if you're the one who makes that connection. You can look at different listservs, like I mentioned, Idealist, the Young Nonprofit Professional Network. I used to use that a lot as a networking opportunity and to look for jobs. My nonprofit currently posts on Indeed a lot. So Indeed's a pretty good nonprofit site. Craigslist probably has, I've heard people getting jobs on Craigslist. Net Impact has a job board. You can look at who's offering different fellowships. And once, so I told you I had an Excel spreadsheet of all the various different sectors I was interested in, and then I would list the companies in those sectors. So I could just keep top of mind who I was interested in doing informationals with or just checking their job board. If you look at, so let's say you look at my nonprofit, for example, on our funder page on our website, you can see all of the people who support us. So then that's an idea to know who else is in the field. You'll see all the list of funders. You could go to their websites to learn, do you want to work at someone like this funder, the foundation, or and then you could look at the foundation, who else they fund on their website. So for example, if Google's funding us, you could look at Google's list of people that they fund. And then now you have a whole nother list of nonprofits to research who are probably in your interest, because if Google's funding one of them funding another might be of another group that you're interested in. So just to get an idea of these millions of nonprofits out there to help find the common denominators, which are often funders. A lot of the similar organizations are funded by the same people. And then volunteering as well. I've been volunteering my whole life. And I've learned about so many nonprofits and opportunities through different volunteering. And even YANA, like founding the YANA chapter in the Bay Area, that was all volunteer. And that chapter, we got up to 750 people. And so I got to learn of 750 nonprofits in the Bay Area just through that one volunteer experience. Okay, so we talked about looking at the job description. And then one point that I find really important is that your 4 years as an undergrad, your two to 5 years as a master's or PhD is a great experience, time to build your resume. So the industry I'm in now, the Community Development Financial Institution, I didn't have that experience before applying. So I used the 2 years at Yale, the MBA program, as resume experience. So I have 2 years of consulting to CDFIs, researching CDFIs, interning at CDFIs, sitting on a board of a CDFI. So then when I did apply, I was like, oh, actually, I'm quite familiar with the industry. Here's 2 whole years of experience that I've done, which can, in some people's mind, it can be as if the same value as if you had worked at a CDFI directly. So I had 2 years to add on versus 0 years if I didn't use my university experience fully to build my resume. And feel free to ask any questions about any of that.
I had a quick question, Jen, if you don't mind. When you mentioned the board, like being on the board, what do you think about that for undergrads? I'm just curious in terms of like how they could maybe approach that, because I could see that being an interesting area, but it could be tricky and kind of intimidating.
Yeah, I mean, the board I joined it was a lender. I pretty much had no idea what they were talking about. The first year I was on the board because it was all finance, very detailed transactions, and we would go over every underwriting memo. But it was a great experience for me. I wouldn't say I necessarily contributed that much expertise to the board, but the board was so happy to invest in the next generation of leaders and staff. And so they were happy just to have me there to answer my questions. And a lot of nonprofits, they're mission-oriented people themselves. They want to contribute to the community. They want to help get more people into this industry because there's lots of other options people could go work at. And all of us are always hoping more people will come work in the field that we're in. So I would say it's a win-win for both. That opportunity I got through Yale School of Management has a club called Board Fellows. And so they had a structure. And so I went to that nonprofit and said, hey, can I join your board as part of the Board Fellows? And that way the Board Fellows will support me in my effort. They were totally fine to be a part of that program. So I don't know if there's any way that undergrads can work with Board Fellows at Yale or at Yale School of Management, or if your career office could develop something like that. But people are always happy, a lot of nonprofits happy to join on to any university type programs, which helps build their awareness of their nonprofit to students and get future employees, future interns, future staff.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a great idea.
All right. So as far as informational interviews, so that's you're reaching out to someone to learn more about their job, their sector, their organization. There's several ways you can go about finding who to informational interview. So if you actually know who you want to interview and you have access to their email through the website, you could send a cold email. So I did that for most of the 25 organizations in San Francisco and Oakland I reached out to. And so I was really surprised that 20 out of 25 responded because they were cold emails. You could look on your LinkedIn connections to see who knows a person at an organization you want to talk to, or just learn about organizations themselves through LinkedIn. You could look through the alumni network for people you want to interview. You could ask your mentors and any professors for contacts they have that are willing to talk to students. Conferences are a great resource for informational interviews. If you look at who are the different speakers on panels, I was telling Robin that I was on a Zoom conference for 2 today and yesterday, 6 hours a day, and then all last week, and there are hundreds of speakers. And so when you look at the speaker list, you get an idea of who are all the organizations in your field and organizations who are interesting enough that people want to hear from them and they're doing really cool work in the field. And then a lot of the people who offer to speak on panels are typically open to doing informationals because they're taking the time to speak and to be out there in the field. And so often they'll be open to speaking to you if you reach out for an informational. So I usually will say in the email something like I wrote here, I'm interested in learning more about your role and organization, as well as trends and opportunities in the field. So to set up an informational, you just pick a time. I do really like doing them in person. Now that's not possible, but if the world returns or we can do that, it's just nice to build that camaraderie. But now that we've been on Zoom for so long now, I think people are building camaraderie via Zoom. So the benefit of Zoom is that most people are working at home and then they have that time, they have some extra time, more flexibility because they're not commuting. Also, some people's schedules are even more maxed out because they're taking care of family and pets at home. So my second point, be very flexible and accommodating to their schedule because a lot of working professionals are really slammed right now. but they also have a bit more time now they're not transporting to work and back. So just see a time that works for them. I would send a quick note the day before just to confirm people are busy. Sometimes they don't put it in their calendar. Just say, hey, looking forward to speaking to you at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Definitely call on time, or if you eventually meet people in person in the future, arrive on time. And then introduce yourself, your status. So I'm a student, I'm a second year, I'm currently trying to learn about organizations in XYZ sector. And kind of let them know what you're hoping to learn on the call so they can take that limited 30 minutes and shape it to what you're looking for. I would have specific questions ready. It's sometimes people ask for informationals and they won't have questions for me and they won't have looked at my organization's website. They won't know what I do. And I feel like they're just not really taking advantage of asking specific questions and having shown that they did the research, because now I'm networking with them. And so if they show initiative and that they did their homework and they have good questions ready, it just shows that they're someone who's showing leadership, initiative, they're hardworking. And maybe if I know they're looking for something in my field, if I hear of things, I'll send it to them because they've made a good impression. So I would definitely be familiar with their career, look at their LinkedIn, look at their company website. And then you can reference, like I saw on your website that, for example, organization, you have an African-American business program. Could you tell me more about ABC? But showing that you know a little bit about what they do. I would be personable on the call, just so, if you act like someone they want to be around, maybe when they have a job opportunity, they'll think of you because they enjoy talking to you. I wouldn't ask for a job or introductions directly on the phone, just because it can get a little awkward, and it's nice to, I'll usually do that in a follow-up email, which I'll show you on the next screen. If there is like a particular job I'm interested in, I just think it's easier by email. People can respond in their own time versus being put on the spot. Or if there's someone you want them to introduce you to, better to ask that afterwards so they take the time to respond. Some qualities I enjoy when I'm talking to people: when people are humble, when they're confident, when they're clear, when they show open-mindedness, when they show their passion, when they display how they're mission-oriented, and when people are gracious, with how they speak and show kindness. And then I have a bunch of questions here. Robin, feel free to share this because I don't know if it would be the best time of everyone's time for me to read through these, but there's 3 slides of questions here. So if you can feel free to have these or your own questions with you when you do informational, just so you have a good amount of questions to fill your 30 minutes. And you'd pick the questions that are most interest to you and would help you determine if this is an organization you want to work at. So a couple questions like, how'd you get involved in this space? What do you like about the sector? What do you enjoy about your role? What are skill sets you use every day? How do you differentiate your nonprofit? What roles do recent undergrads play at your organization or others in the field? Maybe some information about the landscape of their industry. What steps do you recommend I take if I would like to be a program manager at an organization like yours in 10 years? What skill sets do you think I should develop currently at university to prepare myself for a role at an organization like yours? Do you have any tips for job searching or selecting the kind of organization I'm interested in? Okay, so yeah, these are some, feel free to copy these questions. And then in terms of follow-up, it's nice to send a thank you the next day, just thank them for their time. And that's a good time where you can mention any follow-up items referenced on the call. So if they said, oh, there's a recent report that came out you'd really enjoy about the healthcare sector, you could say, oh, would you mind sending me that report you mentioned? And then here you can make gentle asks. So like I wrote here, it would be much appreciated if you could forward me any opportunities you hear of that might be a good fit. If there's, and yeah, when you're setting up an informational, even if you're looking for a job, I wouldn't mention you're interested in a job there, because then they might immediately send you to their HR department, or they might feel uncomfortable maybe providing an edge up to someone who's applying for a job, because that could be preferential to other people who are applying. So so I would go more about the route. I'm just looking to learn more about your organization in the sector. But afterwards, you could say, I will be looking for job opportunities soon in your sector. If you hear of anything, could you please let me know? So I think afterwards it's more appropriate to bring up the job, actually like a job at their organization or an organization they know. And then because you're networking, you want to stay in touch. So maybe there's an interesting article that you find that relates to your conversation, you send them. Or if you do find a job, just say, hey, I really enjoyed our conversation. It helped lead me to this job I'm at now. Just wanted to let you know I'm there. And thank you again for the time you took. It really helped me. So just as you stay in touch with people, you build your network. And, if you're in this industry for a while, if you're in social sector jobs for 30 to 50 years, it's a lot of years where you might be switching jobs. Other people, you might be looking for people in 10 years to come work for you. And so it's just always good to build a network, keep a network, because you'll never know when you'll need to access it later in your life. And also people are just really interesting in the social sector field, and it just, make such good friends in this industry. People are just so passionate and kind and driven that it's just a pleasure to meet so many people in the field. So I think you will enjoy the networking experience. So those were all of my slides, and Robin can feel free to share them with you so you have access to them. I'm seeing 3 things in the chat and then a Q&A. So let's go to the Q&A. And feel free to ask questions as we're going now. It looks like we have 15 more minutes if there are questions for that time. Okay, how can an informational interview turn into a job referral? So you could, so a lot of times the organizations you're talking to will list the jobs on their website. So I would keep checking their website for new jobs that are listed. Or there's actually, like in my industry, there's 3 or 4 sites that list jobs for the whole industry. So sometimes that's good to ask people if you're not as familiar with their industry, like, hey, where are the job boards for your industry? So I can keep checking that. And it'll be easier than checking every single individual website. And then to get for job referrals, that would just be that gentle ask at the end. If you hear of any jobs in your industry, I'd be very interested. Really appreciate you letting me know of anything that becomes available. And then see the chat.
I think that was the chat was, they were asking about the PowerPoint, which I'm happy to send along. Just to piggyback on what you just said, Jen, your overall thoughts, this is so helpful. I love the way you broke it down, and all the questions are wonderful because they're really geared towards this space. We do have some questions on our website, but they're not geared specifically for social sector. So that was great. What would your comment be to students who say, I don't think networking is appropriate with the social sector? Like, I think that it's kind of this like icky thing, and it's not, what the social sector is about.
I would say that hasn't been my experience my entire, what has been 15, 16 years in the sector now, is all been networking, and every event I go to at a nonprofit has a networking session. It's just so ingrained in what we do, because we're just like any other industry where we are looking for a job at some point, or we're looking to hire people at some point. We're looking to make collaborations at some point. So if you're meeting new organizations, you're like, oh, that one organization I met, this one grant is asking for us to apply with a partner. I just learned about that group. It would be great to apply with them. It's just such a collaborative sector. So many partnerships. That's a big part of my job is strategy, organizational development, but also partnerships and collaborations, because a lot of funders want to fund ecosystem building and want to fund organizations getting to a problem together, because it can just be more impact that way. So I would say it just says for-profit networks, social sector networks, and that means we do informationals, that means we do job searches, that means we have networking events. And just the main difference being that a lot of for-profits will come to campuses and have a more structured application process. And they'll be like, okay, we're starting a cohort August 1st, which means everyone needs to apply first round February 1st, and then the second round is March 1st. That's not so common nonprofits, because a lot of times it's one-off opportunities, or they just don't have enough budget to have a cohort. They have budget for one person. So that the job search ends up being, you have to be proactive. So the job tracks, informationals, a lot of the social sector is is putting yourself out there to you're networking for the job. But I find that some people are kind of bummed that it takes a bit more work and jobs aren't just like handed to us. And corporate, it can feel like, and especially in business school, like all the corporations came to campus, people just got all lined up. It was easy and streamlined. And so some of the social sector people were kind of bummed that it wasn't that way for our sector. Some of the big nonprofits did have cohorts and did come in to recruit, but most of us just went out on our own. The benefit being we learned initiative right away. We learned how to go after our goals. And, those are that taking initiative and making things happen for yourself is one of the biggest assets you can have in your whole life, in every aspect of your life. So you're almost like forcing yourself to get that skill set. While it's like maybe in the moment you're like, this is like a lot of work and my corporate friends don't have to do this. You're getting a skill set that you apply in your job, in your future, in all aspects of your life. And it's just such a beneficial skill set to get at such a young age. So I would definitely take advantage of the fact that you are getting this skill set, and it does take more work, but you are then going to find a job even more of a good fit because you had to do so much research to find it. And so you can just feel like a lot of ownership with it, and that you really found something that works for you.
I love that answer. Thank you. That is, yes, I agree wholeheartedly. And I think that's really helpful for students to hear. And the other thing I just wanted to mention is, when you talk about the Trek, it's really interesting because I know that's a big initiative at the MBA level, and at the undergraduate level, we don't have like organized treks. But what's so unique is that you actually ended up doing your own individual trek, which means anybody can do that, and maybe it's not that they're going to the West Coast for, a certain amount of time, or maybe it's like they're going into New York City every Friday when they don't have classes, right? You can really make this into your own.
Yeah, and now you can do job checks even easier remotely. You can set up, let's say you have spring break coming up, and even though people may not be traveling because of COVID, you're like, I'm going to dedicate Monday through Friday of my spring break to informational interviews. And then you just try to set them up. And so you do your own remote job check. And that's might be how it is for the next year. But as I said, it might be easier to get people now because people aren't flying everywhere and needing to spend so much time getting places. So you might be able to access more people now than before. And I think people are also just wanting, in a time right now where they just kind of want to be helpful, and like it's a tough time for everyone in COVID. And so if there's a way someone can be helpful and be informative, I think people are even more now wanting to help. So yeah, do your own job check. And if that 1 week sounds like too much stress to plan everything in 1 week, do an informational. I will do one every other Friday for the school year. And that can be, just start making a list of organizations you want to reach out to. When you go to their websites, you learn of more organizations they partner with or who fund them, put those on your list and just slowly reach out to each one. Look who knows them in your LinkedIn, or if your professors know them, if you're anyone in your student clubs, have a contact there. So just, you can make it easy every other week, or you can, do an actual job check where you do it all in one day over spring break. Many avenues, but just find what works for you, what makes it feel more manageable for you, and just go that route.
Yeah, no, and what you mentioned, that the stats was amazing. You sent it out to 25 and you heard back from 20 of the organizations. Now, were they all through connections? Because I think that's another piece, that obviously if there's a connection, whether it's alum, professor recommendation, but sometimes you're not going to find that, and that's okay, right? Like you can go and cold email somebody that's at an organization you'd love to just hear more about.
Yeah, almost all of mine were cold, but I would try to make a way where it didn't feel cold, where I'd be like, oh, at a conference, I learned of this organization that you partner with, so I wanted to reach out, like just some sort of connection to how I heard about them, or that I somehow know another organization in their industry. But they were technically cold, almost all of them, and they almost all replied, which made me really excited that just to be part of the sector, because people are just so open with their time and just so generous. And then interestingly, because I did get a job in that sector, all those organizations I work with now for the past 7.5 years, like they are my colleagues, and we partner together, and I see them at all the networking events. So the people who you do informational interviews with, like you may be seeing them around.
That's great. That's wonderful. Well, thank you. I mean, I don't know if anybody else has any last questions. I know we're pretty much at time. Oh, somebody
The raised hand.
raised hand. So I'm not sure if there's any more questions. We can stay on for one more minute if that's helpful, but I